You're listening to the Discussing the Resilient podcast, hosted by Aidan Smalling and William Reid, a competitive 40k podcast for the servants of Nurgle and the fallen 14th Legion. Tactics, meta-analysis, and all things Death Guard. Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of the Discussing the Resilient podcast. This time it's just me. It's a third part of my solo series, me being Will, of course. This is the third edition, so obviously if there's anything that doesn't make sense because it links to two previous episodes, each one kind of following on from the other, where it's kind of my journey, I guess, through 10th edition, trying to improve and, you know, track the mistakes I've made and sort of share those with other people. I mean, like, as we've mentioned before in the previous episodes, Aidan's obviously doing some solo stuff as well, where he's kind of focusing in on how to improve, you know, get better, and then also kind of tracking his results, where he's kind of talking about, you know, like a top player and how a top player kind of approaches a game. Whereas I'm more of a sort of a mid-table player, I guess, kind of trying to sort of, you know, raise up the ranks and do a bit better than I had been previously. Started out quite badly in my first tournament, the 10th with Death Guard, only won one game, and then since then I've took Death Guard now to 3 RTTs, each one obviously being 3-round event on one day only. Previous two results were 2.5, and without any spoilers, well, I suppose it's a spoiler, my third one also was 2.5. Now this third one was a bit different, so there's a little bit more to unpack and recap with this one. So I had changed the list, so the first episode was a deep dive on the list I was running, sort of talking through the ideas of it, how I expected it to function, and why it was built the way it was built. As I say, you know, I stand by, this isn't necessarily a top table all-comers list, in the sense it is, you know, still heavily skewed, although slightly less skewed with the change that I made following the first two events. Because what I've done is, so recapping quickly on them, so the skew is, it's an a mainly vehicle sort of heavy list that kind of relies on sort of getting into combat and doing its damage sort of close up. Although the reason it's mainly and not as heavily skewed as it was, there have been 2 blow drones with flesh mowers which I dropped. The reason being that I felt in my particular skew there just wasn't a place for them, and on a whole, if I'm to be totally honest, I'm not really very impressed with the blow drones on a whole. I know other people in the community are high on them and are loving them, because I think they have different roles if you're looking using to spread contagions, kind of bounce around the board and sort of, you know, be useful for doing, you know, secondaries like engaging all fronts and things like that, because obviously they can fall back and shoot, so they can do a charge one turn, assuming they live, they can fall back, you know, maybe spray something with the sprays if that's the low that you've gone for, and then charge again to maybe get into a table quarter. And they are still toughness 9 with a 5 bin bun and 10 wounds. They are still quite durable, you know, I have no questions on them there. But for me, I just found they weren't dealing enough damage to justify being in the list, because I've got lots of other sort of similar profiles, lots of other armour that's kind of doing like a similar role as them, and I'm not as reliant on spreading the contagions, because I'm not running Plague Burst crawlers to sort of, you know, put the contagion and make better use of mortars. So for me, I just found they weren't really doing what I wanted, so I dropped them. And what I dropped them for was two more squads of Plague Marines, so it's now 6 squads of 5 Plague Marines, all with an identical loadout. And I also downgraded a Beast of Nurgle to a squad of Nurglings to get an extra 35 points, and that got me a Rhino too. So for the 235 points I'd saved from dropping the 2 Flesh Mower drones and reducing the Beast to a Nurgling squad, I got 235 points exactly. 2 squads of Nurglings, sorry, 4 squads of what am I on about? 4? I had 4 squads, sorry, 2 squads of Plague Marines and an additional Rhino to make 3 Rhinos total. Sorry about that, got a bit confused there. So now I'll talk through the games. I also said in the last episode I was going to, you know, force myself to take fixed and try that based on the episodes we'd done where we'd recap some of the players who'd also gone 4-1 at the London Grand Tournament. Sam and Pierce being the 2 that I interviewed. Sam and Aidan interviewed Pierce. Obviously Aidan went 4-1 as well, but he did take tactical, and we also deep dive that in a live stream as well. So if you want to sort of go back and recap on those episodes, they're all available on YouTube, and with the exception of the live stream, which is YouTube only. They'll also soon be available on Spotify if they're not up there already at the time of this going live. So also, do a bit of housekeeping as well before I sort of go into the the meat of this episode. So obviously, like and subscribe. It helps the channel grow. The channel's grown incredibly. Me and Aidan are both over the moon with how we've gone. I think we've just passed 2.5k subscribers, which, considering we started this, I'm not even sure it was 6 months ago. Maybe it's not even 4 months. That's amazing. Or maybe it's been longer. It just doesn't feel like very long. I'm not sure. But it's going from strength to strength, and I think already the support we've had has allowed Aidan to get a better microphone and be able to sort of improve the quality of his live recordings. Obviously, Aidan does provide more of the content than I do on this channel, being a top player, and also I'm not necessarily around on the weekends, which I know is when he likes to live stream, because obviously that's when most people are online and a lot of other people are able to do interviews and stuff. Me and Aidan, of course, do have some joint episodes coming as well. I'm going to see Aidan this evening at a club night in Manchester, going to his club night, which is the Hive Wargaming in Manchester, where we'll probably have a chat and talk about what we're going to do on our next episode. It might be something like a meta chat. Maybe we'll talk generally about the meta, some of the armies that are strong, some of the armies that are weak, how Death Guard kind of fit in, and maybe it's kind of just in general some of the list choices to sort of take, and maybe it's to avoid some traps and things like that. But I'm not sure. I mean, this is just something that we may or may not do. We will definitely be doing something together, but we're not sure exactly what. So as I say, if this goes out first or after a podcast with Aidan and it is different content, then that's why. Going into this particular event. So this particular event followed on from the other ones where I said I was going to take fixed. I did stand by that. Now, I did also say in the last podcast one thing that I didn't actually stand by, so I'm going to come clean on that. I don't think it's a big deal. It was more just because when I submitted the list, I had to do it quickly. I was actually past the list submission deadline, and I was getting some messages from the TOs. I thought it was a Wednesday it was submitted, but I think it was maybe the Monday. So on Tuesday, I had an email from them where I said I was going to drop the Plague Spitters on my Plague Marines to Blight Launchers, because that seems to be how most people are running them. Although to me, I think the Plague Spitter does make more sense. I feel like it's a superior weapon, with the exception of the range and obviously the fact it's not 2 damage. But again, this is something that's obviously, of course, personal opinion, and I wanted to try the Blight Launchers to sort of see, was I in the wrong? Am I missing a trick somewhere? But because I'd submitted quickly, I could have probably spent time, but I felt like I was in a bit of a rush. I just copied 2 of the Plague Marine squads that I already had in Battle Scribe with the loadout, which was the Splitters. So they did do that. So unfortunately, that's something that I can't really give feedback on compared to what I planned to do. But I did honour what I said. I did play fixed secondaries in all 3 of my games, and I've got some things to feedback. I made quite a lot of mistakes in these games, actually. So one game in particular, I think the final one, I felt very lucky to have come out with a win there. I think there was some bad dice on my opponent's side, which very much helped me. I also had some bad dice on my turn 4, actually, which sort of maybe helped my opponent sort of make it a bit of a bum squeaker on turn 5. But outside of that, though, I was very lucky. He did sort of bounce off some things that I think he probably should have took down, and he rolled a bit badly with some of his units. But I'll run through those games individually. Like I say, not focusing on a deep dive of the whole game, because I know Aidan does that, and that's something that we kind of focus on with the top players, people sort of explaining their strategies and tactics. Whereas I try to focus a bit more on the mistakes I've made, maybe sort of broadening in like a bit of overall strategy, to explain how the games have gone and things like that. So I'll run through it. So this one, overall, the standard at this one, in terms of how competitive it was a bit higher than the previous 2 I've been to, in the sense of this gaming centre, Leodis Games in Leeds, is a bit more known for sort of being a bit more sort of tournament focused. They use the same terrain that the London Grand Tournament uses, which is the TT combat sets. So they're good boards. They copy the same missions and layout as well, which a lot of UK events do. I mean, obviously the UK TC stuff has sort of set a bit of a standard in the UK, and although not every event does it, there is still lots of variation out there. There's the Glasshammer terrain sets. Some gaming centres have their own sort of bespoke custom made stuff, and there's a couple of the sort of sets out there as well that people use. Still some use the WTC sets and missions as well. So This one was UKTC, obviously the same people who do the London Grand Tournament. I realise we abbreviate that a lot to LGT, and I did wonder if some people, especially maybe listeners in other parts of the world, perhaps didn't realise that's what the abbreviation was. The first round, I got paired into Genestealer Cult. Now, I hadn't played against Genestealer Cult at all in this edition, and I know they took some quite significant nerfs in the last Balanced Data Slate, the same Balanced Data Slate that gave Death Guard its big boost. So, having not played them previously, though, I wasn't really in a position where I could talk heavily about sort of how they've changed as a faction, but they were quite hard to play into. I mean, the demo charges are something else. I think that they definitely looked at in some capacity by Games Workshop. I think they're way too efficient in the way the squads sort of regenerate. So Genestealer Cult's mechanic seems to be that when squads die, they put blips down and they can regenerate them. So I think it's depending on if it's infantry or like a core troop choice, like battle line, so the term or the word I'm looking for. I think the dice roll is different. So I think battle line it might be 4 or maybe even a 3 up, and I think more elite infantry, I think it's a 5 up. So I think that's the difference. But they are like a never-ending sort of swarm. You kill stuff and they come back. But I had been told by previous people that the best thing to do with Genestealer Cult is actually try and kill them down to a man or 2 men. So the squad kind of gets neutered a bit, and then once you've done that, just leave them there because they're sort of useless. That they don't get the demo charges back once they've been done, and they generally sort of aren't, don't have enough OC control, and they're not sort of running enough dice in combat to keep them threatening. To do that with a battle line at least, especially if they don't come back with the character, and the character gives them some buffs as well. It allows them to do a full reroll with the demo charges, which are, as I say, pretty brutal. I did sort of employ that tactic wherever I could. Now, obviously, we talked at the start of the game. We ran through armies and explained. He did mention something to me, which I didn't actually hear, but I'm pretty sure he would have done, because I think there was a point where I was starting to focus on tactics, and I think I sort of switched off a little bit from what he'd said, because people will know when you're running through army, sometimes to run through everything and every rule, it can take sort of 5-10 minutes, and sometimes after you feel you've got the gist, you start sort of focusing on other stuff. So he did tell me that he could, for a CP, give one of his, again, I'm terrible with the names, I think they're the Acolytes, I think they're called. It's the bigger chunky ones that have a 4+ feel no pain. In previous editions, I think the champion swings a signpost at you, which used to be strong enough to bring down knights. So it was a bit of a running joke about how they can bring down knights with lampposts. But they can spend them a 1 CP and make them low and operative. Now, I did set up 3 Predators to shoot a squad. I did put them just outside of 12 inches. They were all about, I think one was an 12 to a 14-inch away, and I did have to move to make them 12, and he played the strat, and because he said at the start of the game, we agreed it wouldn't be fair for me to sort of, take the extra 2 inches and put them in. Now, again, I think I got you myself there, really, because he was a very lovely guy, very, he did take his time to explain all the rules, and I'm 99.9% certain that it was me who switched off and didn't fully take in what he said. So again, this comes back to, things to learn, things to pay attention to, and one of those is, paying attention to your opponent, and also maybe he's asking, is there any way that you can put low and up on any of your units as a specific question? Because I have also been caught out with that with other games, playing Space Marines. They can put characters within range of infantry units, and the infantry units get low and up, and or the character gets low and up. I can't remember exactly how that one works, but I have come across with that before. So I think it's a good question to ask an opponent. Do you have any low and up? And then expand on that. Is there any way you can make them low and up, aka character and infantry combos, or stratagems, anything like that? Because I could have shot all 3 Predators into the squad, which was my intention, to try to whittle the squad down to sort of 3 or 4 bodies that I felt I could then sort of deal with the Plague Marine squad, or at least kind of maybe sort of wrap them up and sort of keep them in place for a bit, which I wasn't able to do, and then they kind of made their way into my lines and rampaged a little bit. But it didn't really matter. They came into a corner, if I'm honest, and they killed a couple of Predators, but the Predators weren't near objectives, and at that point the Predators kind of were out the way. They're also screening, because Genestealer Cult can come in within 3 inches of you, which is quite hard. So you have to sort of screen, 6 or maybe 7 inches. You can get away with, just under 7 inches between each of your models without leaving a 3-inch gap either side and room to put a base in. So I was kind of quite condensing my deployment zone. But obviously I still ran the 3 carnivores very quick. So when I needed to sort of get to place, I could do. And the predators, could still shoot and stuff like that. And the Plague Marines did just sit in their rhinos, and then just jumped out to sort of go stand on objectives and do my actions. Now, as I said, I'd take fixing all the games. In this one, I took cleanse and teleport homers, which both were fine for me. There wasn't really much to report on them. I had enough units to do both quite comfortably. I just cleansed the centre objective and the objective to the left, where I also sent Morty. So I actually use Morty a lot to cleanse in all of my games, because obviously he's so big and tough, things can't kill him. He's a vehicle and also has a pistol, so even if someone charges him, he can still do the action when he's in combat. Especially if he's backed up by Nurglings, making him -1 to hit by infantry squads. So I found him very good with a Rhino with 2 Plague Marines in kind of behind the wall, close to objectives. They could also go in and put the extra OC if I needed it. So doing that, and then just chucking Plague Marine squads or the squad, just chucking chaff into the middle basically to do cleanse on the second one with the Nurglings. Generally did teleport homers behind the wall. So it worked quite well. Now I won this game by about 5 points, and if I'm to be totally honest, it was a close game. We did trade quite well. The reason that I won this game though was because my opponent took tactical, and his tactical cards, they just really weren't good for him. His first turn, I can't remember what he drew exactly. It might have been engaging all fronts and behind enemy lines, something like that. It was 2 things that he just couldn't score. So he on his first turn scored 0 on secondaries, and then turn after, I can't remember what he drew, but he also got equally poor cards. I think he managed to get 3 on one of his secondaries, but that was the most he could get. So because I was getting 4s and 3s, he was at a bit of a deficit. I also, on his first turn in primary, I held him to 5 in the primary. I threw some Plague Marines on a squad, onto an objective where we didn't have enough OC to hold it. So between that and his 5 on primary, he just wasn't able to sort of claw back. So it was a close game. He did run me to the line, but I just sort of played my mission as I could do and stuck to my secondaries, and I think I pulled it out by about 6 points. So it was a close game, and if I'm to be honest, I was lucky with him getting poor cards. I think if he'd have drew better cards, I think it would have probably been maybe I would have still won. I don't know, but it certainly would have been a closer game. But a lovely opponent, great guy, and despite sort of being maybe he's a bit gotcha'd, I think I gotcha'd myself, if I'm to be honest. Same as I talked about in the last episode and why I'm doing this. It's important to ask questions, important to pay attention to your opponent, because when you don't ask the right questions, or if your opponent tells you something that you don't fully understand or take in, you don't expand, or you just weren't listening, that's on you as a player. So that was on me very much so. Now second game, I've got loads of notes. I'm going to just open up my phone here. I made quite a lot of mistakes, but this is a funny game actually. So I'm not sure how I feel about this game, if I'm to be totally honest. Now, it went down as a draw, but now I say I don't want to talk about this game. It's not because my opponent was bad. It was because I don't know how I feel about this. Now, I'll recap and explain what happened. So, my opponent was World Eaters. Now, my opponent brought 2 Land Raiders. Now, we talked on my previous episode about some list change, how I tried a Land Raider. But on the UKTC maps, not the ones I use at LGT, because I did make some additions that went in the booklets that they hand out at the event with the terrain on, that they made space for a Land Raider to move through. So there was gap to deploy a Land Raider behind the scenery and then move it through, because on the old ones, which they still had on their website, there's no way to put Land Raider behind scenery and move it anywhere. I don't even think on one of the maps, which is a second mission, I don't even think you can deploy it in the deployment zone in front of the terrain. I don't think there's room to do it. And obviously, you can rapid ingress them in, but it's a big model, and even then you kind of you're giving it away or giving your opponent a chance to screen. Now, my opponent had bought 2. Now he was a bit of a fluffier player, I think, because when he was moving his Land Raiders, he was just bending the tape measure, like you'd sort of bend it round a corner, like a like Land Raiders obviously aren't a snake. They're not sort of like a millimetre thick. You have to slide the hull out. So say they're about 5 or 6 inches wide, I think, sponson to sponson. So in theory, if it's fully behind a wall, you have to slide it out 6 inches, or maybe there's a diagonal to do there. It depends on how you put it. But the first 6 inches is getting it then, to move out, and then you then move it forward 4 inches. He didn't seem to understand this and seemed to just be sort of trying to curl them round and use his full 10 inches to sort of have it behind cover and then pop it out. Now, again, this wasn't any criticism towards him, because he did sort of say that that's not how he plays with his friends, and they're a bit more relaxed with this stuff. And obviously the tournament, that's not really how it works. This is why we do this podcast. It's great to do that in fluffy games if you and your friend are both doing it with models, but that's not how it works, not how movement works. Also, there isn't any move to deploy those Land Raiders on the map, because it did play the maps off the website and there wasn't any way to do it. Now, I didn't make a point of this. I'm making a point a little bit with the Land Raider movement, how it wasn't the snake and it couldn't just curl around walls, but I did let him move the 6-inch sponsons through gaps that were 4.5 inches and narrower, because I thought, well, he's a fluffier player, it's a bit harsh for me to sort of like do that, because if I'm a stickler to this, he's going to have his Land Raider deployment, and I don't really know how the game would unfold for him in any way. I don't know how he could really play the game at all and be even slightly competitive. So I let him move them out, and that was one thing. Now, he was a little bit slower at playing. To be fair, actually, not slow. It's probably not on him. I think we were both slow, because we were talking and we had a bit of discussion about movement and stuff like that. And we only got to the bottom of, I think it was my turn 4. Now, the reason I don't know how I feel about this game is he was up on points. I'm going to run through all the mistakes I made for him to get up on points, because I made a lot of mistakes, and I'd take a lot away from this game that I would have done differently on the first 3 turns. But at the same time, at the bottom of my turn 4, I realised the only way I was going to win that game was to set up my whole army pretty much to just charge and just go and smash. Because I took a lot of chunks off him basically, and I kind of felt, well, on my turn 4, I can pretty much table him, and then if I'm not tabling him, I'm putting him in a position where he's not really going to score enough on the primary. I can basically make it so he just can't score any points unless he gets very lucky on his cards. Which I was thinking, well, that's what I'm going to do, and if that happens, then I don't see how he can pull the game out, even though I am at a deficit at this point. But we didn't have time to do this, so we kind of ummed and ermed, we talked about it, and I was saying, well, this is how I'd win it. He kind of agreed if I could do that, he could, but then he wanted to 4 plus the game, roll a dice, and 4 plus, he wins, 4 or left 1 to 3, I win, and I wasn't happy to call that on the game, because I think it's a silly way to do it. So he kind of suggested it, and I was kind of thinking about suggesting it. I mean, at one point I was like, looking at it, you just have the win, and he was like, no, because I'd put my argument for as to why. I think he also felt a bit funny about taking the win in that instance, because we had a lot of the game left to play. So in the end, we kind of agreed to call it a draw. Now, as a TO, I do TO the Stonehammer events at Element Games, and actually this is what I enforce to people if the round goes on. I'm not going to sort of list players particularly, but there's been games where people have been at the bottom of turn 3, and they're both an argument they could win, and then it's kind of been, submit your score time. So I've kind of gone up and said, look, guys, right, you're both at a point where you're both arguing you can win. Obviously, no one's going to be happy if one of you gets a win and a loss. We need to put the scores and draw the next round. So I'm going to tell you it's a draw, or you both get 0. So what would you rather? Do you both want to sort of, either argue it out? I'll give you 2 minutes to argue out, and one of you declare it to win. Roll dice if you need to, but if you don't do it in 2 minutes, it's a 0-0. Or to simplify this, we'll call it a draw. And 9 out of 10 times, or 9 out of 10 every time, people accept the draw, because I think that's the best thing to do. To be honest, I think it's the fairest. So in that sense, it was fair. But because I went on an undefeated run, I wasn't as proud of the undefeated run than I maybe would have been normally, because this was a more competitive than the previously. The first player was a good player, and this guy, he wasn't a bad player. He just took a list that wasn't really, he hadn't really thought about the terrain, but he wasn't a bad player, and he put me up against it. Now, I put that caveat in there because I wanted to say that, and I don't want to sit there and sort of have someone sort of comment up on the event and say that because that's, you know, I've said my piece on that basically. You know, I was quite good letting him move the Land Raiders where I did, I think, but then at the same, which I hadn't have done, I don't think he'd get the win, but I had done that, and then where we played it out. But I made a lot of mistakes. Now, anyway, this is where I'm going to run through these mistakes, and I'm going to talk through, and, you know, this is the whole point of this podcast. So, one of the things, now I forgot to do this, so this is something that, you know, comes down to sort of honestly the plan. This is one of the reasons why actually I actually felt a bit bad. Now, I will caveat this as after I've explained it as to why it was a mistake, but I don't really think it would have changed the game as much as the opponent at the time felt it was, because if he'd have done it differently, he would have handed me the win, I think, to be honest. So I forgot to explain to him that Nurglings have a 6-inch aura that gives infantry -1 to hit, because he moved the Land Raider through a tunnel that it wasn't actually able to move through to get an extra 8 inches, I think it was, because apparently World Eaters also get 2 inches on that. I think just a faction rule. And then, you know, so he drew cards, but he was playing cards, and I think he had to it was tempting target and something else, I think. It was tempting target and engage he drew in his first turn. So, and I picked the objective that I've moved Mortarion onto with three squeeze squads of Nurglings. So I'd gone first. Mortarion had gone there with the Nurglings, and they cleansed basically on it. That was what they'd gone to do. Now, he had a massive executions and 10 berserkers in this Land Raider. Now, he got out. It was a big charge. It was like a 9-inch charge, I think. But he rolled it. He got them in. I think he rolled 6-6, which was, you know, fair play. We were joking, you know, if you because I think he originally, when he thought the Land Raider could move like a snake and could just curl around the corner, I think he measured it like a 7-inch charge or something. But as I said, you know, I'd let him move it down the channel without making too much of a point about that. But I wasn't happy for him to just sort of curl it round like it was a millimetre wide. He had to still slide it out and move it forwards, which I felt was fair. But obviously, you know, Land Raider can get out and charge, and he made the charge. It was a good play, but at the same time, he was kind of sending the Khorne Berserkers and the Massive Executions to the death, or possibly not though, because the Massive Executions is actually very good at killing characters. It turns out he has some good tech, and this is one of the first mistakes I made. Now, through doing this, when I told him about the Nurglings and he wasn't really able to hit things, and then he was wounding Morty on 6s with the Khorne Berserkers, and then he hadn't got enough base in the Nurglings. He did have to charge them both, you see, to get in. He felt like he'd been cheating, and I did kind of say you can take it back if you want, but then if he took it back, he was going to lose 8 points on the cards. So it was kind of one of these things where, you know, do you want 8 points on the cards, or do you want to keep your Khorne Berserkers alive? Because you can't have it both ways. So we decided to keep it, and then just got a little bit frustrated with the dice when he wasn't able to sort of hit and wound as much as he wanted to, which was you know, fair from his point of view. I could see it from, you know, why he felt that way. And also the Massive Executions did get into Morty, and the Massive Executions was actually quite a threat to Morty, which is one of the mistakes that I made during this game, and one of the things I'm going to sort of highlight and focus on. The Khorne Berserkers, especially when they're hitting on -2, and I think the wound on 6s, they just weren't really, they didn't have much going on into Morty, and because they're hitting on 5s, and the Nurglings had 12 wounds, and they only had one damage attacks, they weren't great at clearing the Nurglings either. So although they took it with points with his 2 obsec bodies, Mortarion's only OC6, so he got his points and was able to get into my table quote as well. It was one of these things where he didn't do the damage he'd expected to. Morty only has 5 attacks, and this is where Morty's a little 5 attacks. This is where Morty's a little bit sad. So slapping back into Khorne Berserkers, I think he picked up 4 of them quite comfortably, but it's only 4 Khorne Berserkers from a Primarch, which because you have to do the big swings. I thought about doing the little swings, but I think statistically it's pretty similar as to how it sort of falls out in the kill. So just do the big swings. Now, the mistake that I made in the following turn was, and possibly even the first one, now, the Massive Executions was actually quite a threat to Mortarion, because he rolls d6 and that's his damage, and he has loads of special rules when he's fighting characters, and he also gave the Khorne Berserker squad the fight first keyword. So the following turn, when I charged in my Plague Marines, a squad of Plague Marines and a Carnivore to kind of clear them off basically, they did actually get to fight first. Now, he swung into Mortarion, which kind of helped me a bit, but him swinging to Mortarion, the Massive Executions, I did make Mortarion -1 damage with the CP I had, and I think I saved another CP to maybe re-roll a save. So the Master Executions did actually do a lot of damage to Morty because the -1 damage and the re-roll and the save. I was able to keep him living, to feel no pain. I think he lived on about 3 wounds or something. Now, the mistake I made, I should have spent the CP in hindsight to make Morty fight, take on the character, basically. If I took the Massive Executions out the squad, the Corn Berserkers wouldn't have fought first and I charged him previously, and they wouldn't really have, the Massive Execution, the only thing that really hurt Morty. So Morty would have been alive for the second round of combat. So it's the first round of combat I should have done that. That was a bit of a mistake on my part in that sense. Now, the other mistakes I made in this game was I took Cleanse and Teleport Home as a game. I actually made quite a few mistakes in this. Now, one of them, so the mission in this one was the kill more and hold more one. Now, I made a mistake here, and quite a big one. So my opponent had got massive swing. He had like a 16-point swing on me or something on the first by his turn 2. Which is why I was a bit I wasn't sure how I felt about at the end of the game when we called it a draw, because he was up and I'd kind of clawed it back, and I'd been able to close the gap significantly, but he was still a few points ahead and he had lots of scoring potential left. So because it was the kill more, now I put a unit in the centre to cleanse. It's an open centre on that board, which of course left it open. Now, I wasn't able to kill on my first turn. I don't have the Plague Burst Crawlers. I have no way of reaching his deployment zone. I do have 3 carnivores with the outer line of sight rockets, which did all shoot into his cultists, but they weren't enough to sort of kill. So you need to kill on the first turn to get 4 points, and then kill more as additional. Because you can score 8 points on the first turn on the primary in this mission. So I didn't kill anything, so I didn't get 4 points, and obviously because I didn't kill anything, it was impossible for me to get kill more. Because I had a unit in the centre, he picked that up, which meant he got a kill and a kill more on his first turn. So I was 8 points down, and again, as we talked about his secondaries, drawing the cards. It was 5 and 3, I think it's worth. 3 for the engage, 3/4, 5 for the tempting target on the objective. So again, on my turn, I'd scored 4 because I only held 1. I didn't hold more because he cleared the centre. And I was getting 7 on my secondaries. So he was up basically, and this is kind of where we were. But at that point, he put stuff into my deployment zone. I was able to clear it. Obviously, the Corn Berserkers don't really live through the stuff I charged in them. Although he did make a lot more 6s than you would expect to roll, because obviously the Ep3, I went for the -1 to hit Contagion, which might have been a mistake. I couldn't decide because obviously it's still Space Marine armour, but then obviously he wants to be in combat, and I couldn't decide if I made the right decision with that Contagion or not. I think I did. But I think there's a 50-50 argument for that one either way. Now, on my second turn, I also made a mistake because he was kind of in my deployment zone. I sort of figured that it wasn't possible for me to teleport homers and cleanse. So I teleport homers because it's worth more points on the one, and then I cleanse on the left-hand side one, where Morty was actually Morty cleanse because obviously he's got a pistol, he's a monster, so he did it while he was in combat with the Corn Berserkers. Can't charge, but he can still slap back, is my understanding. If that's wrong, of course, then then I'll learn. I could have done it with a different unit. I could have just took an extra Plague Marine squad out the Rhino. There was space to get in there and be an engagement anyway, because I did hold the objective by I put more Plague Marines on in the Carnivore anyway, so I held it at the end of the term. So it was possible for me to do it anyway. I could have just put 2 Plague Marine squads out instead of 1 Plague Marine squad out the Rhino, if for whatever reason more time couldn't do that. My understanding of, if you've got a pistol, you can do an action in combat, and if you're a vehicle, you can as well. So I don't see why you couldn't, unless I'm missing a rule there. Now, I'm just trying to look through, because I did make some notes. And as you can see, I made quite a few mistakes in this, and I think they were quite costly. And on this turn, I realised afterwards I had a second unit of Nurglings in Deep Strike to threaten his deployment zone, and there was a space. So I could have teleport homers for 4, which would have been 1 wall and I'd scored, and cleanse on the middle objective instead of teleport homering, which would have obviously given me an additional 3 points. And obviously where we were with the deficit I was trying to claw back, I think that's something I should have done. But I didn't. I realised afterwards when it was too late. I did bring the Nurglings in the following turn, so I was able to sort of cleanse there with 4. And at that point he was pushing quite far out his own deployment zone. So he wasn't really able to deal with the Nurglings the following turn, so it was another 4 and teleport homers, which again is how I was going to claw back into this game. So I'm just having a look here to sort of talk through and see if there's anything else in this game that I should have sort of done. I think I've kind of talked through it really. I think in this game, like they say, the land raider thing is a moot point really. I'm just saying, if I'd have been, this is more sort of trying to counter at the far. I felt like I wasn't sure how I felt about myself at the end when I was sort of, arguing, well, I could win, because I could win, but at the same time, was it likely to win? I don't know. We needed to roll a lot of dice to find out. The question is, does a carnivore, 3 predators shooting, and 2 squads of plague marines kill 10 corn berserkers in Khan the Betrayer? I think it probably does, but we don't know basically until you actually roll the dice. And then there was a couple of other things that had to go off as well. I think another carnivore was going to try and finish a land raider that was on 4 wounds, and there was stuff like that. And at this point, I had killed the corn berserkers in the other corner. His second land raider was also on 5 wounds and in combat with the carnivore. I think, because there was 1 carnivore going to charge the corn berserkers, and there was 3 left. I think that's what it was. I'm trying to in my head remember the board state. So like I say, it was, and he had a Mauler Fiend, because he had 2 Mauler Fiends, and the shooty, God, I'm terrible with the names, and a Forge Fiend as well. I can't remember. I killed 1 Mauler Fiend for shooting the previous turn. I think I'd worked out the Forge Fiend couldn't get a line on anything, but the way I'd deployed. I also think, was there something that was going to do something that can't remember with that one, or did I was that dead at that point? Can't remember. There was a Mauler Fiend. Sorry again, it's quite hard to recap when I'm doing. There was a Mauler Fiend was gonna. The only thing that could threaten my home field objective was a Mauler Fiend, which I blocked off with the Predator. I'd accepted I was going to lose the Predator that turn to block him off, but again, I had another turn to hold him sticky objective. I was just going to throw another Predator there and block him a second turn. And if he'd have got behind enemy lines, fair play. But the second Predator could have shot him because he had taken some damage. So this is how I felt I could table him. Basically, he was going to be playing with dust if my turn had gone to plan. And at that point, even though there was a deficit, I would have got hold more, kill more. And then I don't know if he would have been able to get anything more. He might have got 4 for holding his home field objective, actually sticking it with cultists. And yeah, would have depended on the card. So like I say, so we called it a draw, but as I'm trying to explain, I'm not 100% certain how I felt about that game afterwards. I wasn't sure. But he was a lovely guy, he was a lovely opponent. As much as I don't want to sort of paint out to be a bad guy, because the stuff that he'd done, like with the land raiders, so if he didn't realise, and it was I was trying to be nice, but he was a really, really fun guy. He was talking about how he bought his list, and we was making jokes and things like that. And I really enjoyed playing him, to be fair. It was just one of those things, because where we were with time, that was the sort of the thing that made it a bit contentious. The contentious thing was it actually a draw? Should it have been a win to me, or should it have actually been a loss? Should I have just said, right, well, where we are, I've lost. I think I can win it back if we play the next 2 turns, but fair play. I couldn't decide basically, and I wasn't sure what was the right player etiquette on that one. So Game 3 now. Game 3 was a really interesting game though, and again, I actually made loads of mistakes and have a bit to feedback in this one as well. The Game 3 was quite an interesting one. Now, Game 3 was against pretty much the meta Chaos Space Marine list, give or take a few units. Didn't have the Sinestro Demon Prince, the one with the Demonette riding the sort of larger model shoulders. A game terrible with names. Sort of can be a running theme on this podcast. If anyone have used to watch the Mighty Boosh, anyone in the UK, Bob Fossil's a guy who used to run this zoo, and he can never remember the name of the animal. So like the snake was called the long neck winder and stuff like that. He used to just have silly descriptions. I feel a bit like I'm pulling out the bag with these. Just describe what units look like or what their abilities are. But hopefully, people know. And if anyone's really stuck in the comments, if you mention it, I will. I can work it out by either going through opponents' lists or going from the GW website and finding the models of what they look like. Now, this last game, though, recapping that, I made some mistakes, but it was a very interesting game, I have to say, because, again, I stayed true to what I was with fixed secondaries, and I realised I couldn't do cleanse. It was a one where the middle objective splits and goes in the middle. I realised I couldn't do cleanse because I was just going to stand out in the open and he was just going to come and punch me, and also he said he was going to go fix and doing the one where storm hostile objective. So, we're trading it. So I was like, well, I suppose I'll do Storm Hostile objective too, because that kind of makes sense. And then I'll also still do Teleport Homers. And he went bring it down, because my list does bleed bring it down. So he was right to do that. Now, it was a funny game. So I went first, and I kind of realised I couldn't put anything on objectives because he would get the jump on me with the trade. So I was hoping he put something on objectives and I'd get the jump on him. Because whoever started that was probably going to win on it, basically. Now, we started off the first 2 turns being a really passive game. I realised, though, because Morty's really tough and the furthest objective away from him he couldn't get to with anything, I could pretty much screen off, so he'd only take shooting from 1 Forge Fiend. So I set that up. He did live through the 1 Forge Fiend. I think he only took like 4 wounds or something, and I spent the D3 spent the CP to put D3 wounds back in the following turn to keep him alive. And Morty was what it was able to for me to score 10 on the primary, and he was too scared to come out and put anything on the primary to let me get Storm Hostile, and I'd just take it off him anyway because I had more object bodies than he did. So he kind of played a passive game. Now, the first 2 turns he did this, I was getting teleporters in the middle, so I was getting some secondary points that he wasn't. And then he kind of realised that I think at this point I was like 25 points up or something. He was smart enough to realise if we just stood that, like it was my game, we may as well just shake hands there and then. But if he pushed, because I was limited on teleport homers and he could max bring it down quite easily by pushing into me and killing my vehicles, because I've been pulling my vehicles away from him. He bought his obliterators and I pushed out a big screen so he couldn't get the obliterators in range, or he had really limited targets, he couldn't get the melter on stuff, and he rolled badly on them as well when he brought them in. So I was able to live, and I was moving away from them to sort of keep my vehicles alive and deny those points from him. Now, there was a bit in this game where I think I could have put this game to bed, but it was a risky play, because if I put the game to bed, it would have also let him into the game. And this is where I'm unsure on this. I think maybe I played it right, maybe I didn't, because in the past I've made the mistake of like going for gun-ho, if this comes off, I win the game at this point plays, which hasn't always been the right thing to do, because sometimes it's like, well, those plays can also lose you the game, and that's kind of one of my like player errors. So it was an 8-inch charge for the Carnivore into 4 obliterators, which were kind of like pushing to get lines on me, and it was kind of forcing me to move on my vehicles back. But I shot them with 2 predators, I think killed 1 and whittled 1 down to so many wounds. And if the Carnivore makes it in with the Carnivore's profile, I think he probably picks up at least 1, if not both, if least not 2, probably should pick up 2, maybe even all 3 actually, because there's 2 full and 1 wounded one. And then I also, because he also had 1 touchdown objective at this point, I would have also stormed Hostile and held him to 5 points, and he'd have lost the ability to kill vehicles on one side. So I was really tempted to do it, but I also thought, well, I'm so far on points, if I just turtle up and play conservatively, it's going to be hard for him to like get the deficit going. But he did push into me, and he did threaten me a lot. Now, I did get decision paralysis in one turn, and the game came down to the last turn. We finished the game, but we ran over by 5, and I think this was my fault. I got decision paralysis. He had some possessed. He charged a possessed into me, and he was fighting a predator and a rhino. Now, we killed the rhino. Plague Marines got out, and he piled into them. The Plague Marines fought them back. Didn't do a huge amount. He was smart. He piled into Plague Marines to stop them from sort of going around and doing me teleport homers in the middle. He blocked them off, so I couldn't get them out to do that. So at this point, he realised if he could stop me doing teleport homers, he did shut me down for 1 turn, that he could sort of do that. Now, I got decision paralysis thinking, 1, should I go and charge do the charge top in the obliterators? I was still thinking about that. That was kind of still on. And then, but is it also just more important to clear the possessed, was my other sort of thinking, is it better if I just take his assets out the game? Because I'd already traded some Warp Talons for Plague Marines, because I realised it was the end of game scoring where if you stand objectives, that same mission, you get 5 points at the end of the game, I think including your home field. It's the same one that I played in the top of the last video, talking in it was the second round then. So I needed him to not be able to sort of catch up the score in the last round and kind of take his assets off him, but it meant I was also losing assets. So I think that was the right decision to sort of, keep it like quite a bare board state, and Kimsey had to push into my deployments once he was away from the centre objectives. Now, my turn 4, now I kind of, after decision paralysis, I decided I just got to clear my lines, get as much stuff as I can, and stop him from being able to sort of go at the middle objectives and sort of hold on the later turns of the game. Because at that point the obliterators were kind of like pinned in a corner. They were too slow to really move anywhere else. So I did that. Now I whiffed actually that turn very hard. The predators couldn't shoot anything for love nor money. 1s and 2s, back to sort of Caesar 1s and 2s. You should just call them the double 1 squad really, because those las cannons are so good at rolling double 1. It's almost comical. The 2 carnivores I charged either side in the possessed squads, so they couldn't sort of pile in. I just said, can I roll them together? Because obviously I don't think there's any way you can pick them up for the other one not to go in, because he had a character in there as well that was kind of within 3 of them both, so I'll be able to pile in the character either way. So we kind of agreed. Now, average dice 2 carnivores, hitting on 2s, wounding on 2s as well. It should be, 8 hits, 6 attacks each, so 12 dice. Should be 10 hits, average dice, and then 8 or 9 depending on which way the dice go, successful wounds, and obviously his saves coming at thirds. I managed to get 3 wounds through. I rolled so many 1s on them it was comical. Maybe that's why I shouldn't roll them together. Maybe it was the dice gods telling me something. But anyway, so he had assets left that I didn't think he was expecting to, and then he pushed into me. Now luckily on his 4th turn he had an equally bad round of shooting, because he realised I had a squad of plague marines. He was trying to stop me from doing teleport homers. He left them to the man, and he made a small mistake where instead of finishing the squad off and charging, he tried to push my home field, which it wasn't really going to happen because I had a carnivore on there with 8 OC, and he didn't really have the assets to sort of kill it in combat, I didn't think. And he whiffed anyway on his dice, so whether he did or he didn't, he was quite unlucky in that sense. So I was able to get that was another teleport home as I got. And on the last turn, he sort of we realised he could still win the game on his last turn by just killing vehicles. So I realised, maybe it was turn 3 I've talked through as turn 4, because I did have another turn after this, so maybe that was turn 3. But anyway, so we realised I had to bring Morty out. So I brought Morty out to kill the Forge Fiend that was going to take one of his central objectives. That then put Morty on an objective he wasn't expecting to be on, and I ran one of the 3rd carnivore who wasn't in the game at this point, who was on the other side of the board, to the far objective where there wasn't really line of sight to do anything about it. So at the end of the game I actually held more of the mid board than he did, so he wasn't able to get the jump on me there, and because I killed the Forge Fiend, it took out an asset for him to bring it down points. Now I did make some mistakes in this though, so I'm just going to run through this, because at turn 3 there was quite a few. So backing off the vehicles, as I say, I think it was right, apart from that carnivore should have made the charge, but would have let him in the game. I'm really not sure about that one. Killing the scoring units, the warp talons for my plague marines stopped me from doing the teleport homers on that round. Again, I do stand by that, because it stopped him from getting the jump on me on that last round and getting those 5 points for standing on the objectives. And I think, there was also, he left a gap in his deployment zone for me to get 3 Nurgling base in, which would have got me the teleport homers on the turn I wasn't able to, because the plague marines had gone with it the turn where he pushed into me. Now, though that squad of Nurglings took way more to kill than it should have done, so he got bad dice and I got lucky on the saves. If that had lived on 1 and I'd have been able to sort of teleport homers there, that would have also been bad, because I'd learned from the previous game where I kept looking for space in his deployment zone to drop the Nurglings in and get that teleport homers. But I do feel in the last game, although I won it, it wasn't like the previous game where I won it, sort of circumstance and I'm not 100% sure about. I did win it fair and square, in the sense of, there were points there was really any ambiguity over it being my win. I think if he'd have just pushed into me from turn 1, it would have been a very different game. I think maybe that was probably the right thing for him to do. Push into me but avoid the objectives, so he just goes to my vehicles, gets up on the sort of the bring it down points. Because if, for example, if he'd have killed 4 vehicles, he'd have cut more on bring it down than I would have been able to score on teleport homers. So that would have been a bit of an issue for me. 4 or 5 vehicles anyway. I need to work out exactly. Depends on what vehicles as well. But he could have done that. So he was smart enough to see the play, but he saw it too late. Because if he'd have done that, I think my only play would have then been to push back and play for the table, which I don't know if I could have done. And maybe I could have done if he sort of come close to me enough to do that, but at the same time, maybe not. So I got lucky in that one, I think. I think because of the dice and that sort of, he had a clutch turn 4 where he whiffed, but like I said, I'd whiffed my previous one. He had more of assets in play than I think he should have done, and then his assets did whiff, which was, I think, the luck on my part. So I don't know, that game was a bit of a nail biter, and I'm not sort of sure, it felt like if we played it again, if he pushed into me turn 1, I'd probably lose it, if I'm to be honest. I think he was too passive. But the thing that really won me that, the thing that really sort of came in, was Morty taking the objective. So I was getting 10 on the primary, he was getting 5, and then because he wasn't scoring any secondaries, because neither of us went to centre, so we could do the storm hostile objective, and I was able to get teleport homers. That was, that sort of played in my favour. Now, so that's the recap there. So I went 2.5, so 3 2.5s in a row. Sort of that draws or always going to be seems to be sort of like a weird thing. Now that second one was more of a GT standard in terms of the individual games. It was kind of more what you'd expect at the mid tables of a GT. I think in terms of the player standard, player skill, the lists I played into, it was certainly a lot more. Had to do a lot more thinking than I would have had to have done, at the previous ones. Not that I didn't have, there were brain dead games or anything like that, the previous 2 events, but I'd certainly felt like it was harder. But that being said, I'd also sort of learned a lot with the list previously. Dropping the 2 flesh moors for the Plague Marines, 100% the right thing to do. I don't look back on that decision at all and question it for even a second. The flesh moors in this list just do not have a place, and I'm just not even really solving them as units particularly. To be fair, even the spitters, there's times when I blind 2 Plague Marine squads with 2 spitters into infantry, roll the 2 and a 3, 5 shots, and the blow drone, the spitters do exactly the same. It's exactly the same weapon profile. And same as I said previously, I don't think the mower's great, anything other than like 2 wound marine bodies that are like toughness 4 or maybe toughness 5. And then the heavy blight launch, okay, that's good. I can see why you would maybe take that one. But I think at that point there were better shooting options. So I don't know. I'm just not really seeing the bloke drones. But I know other people are, and other people put them as MVP units. And I think in different builds, I think it's just because my skew is as heavy as it is. Now, things to take away from it. I actually think fixed secondaries are good, but I think overall, I don't think they're great in every matchup. I think the last one, for example, the last game at the Chaos Base, I think if I'd have not told myself I was going to take it, I think tactical would have been the way to go. Maybe it's even tactical in the second one as well, actually. I'm not sure about that one. And maybe Storm Hostile Objective on that second one, because the World Eaters player had to come and smash me. He couldn't really stand off and just sort of look at me, because of how World Eaters are. So maybe I made a choice with the wrong fixed secondaries there. I'm not sure that's something that would, I'd have to sort of think on. And the last game, I think I would have taken tactical if I hadn't have set myself that sort of restriction. But I think the first game, the fixed one, worked really well. Maybe because he drew crap on his tactical, maybe if he'd have drew well, maybe I'd have felt like the tactical just scores higher. So I don't know. I think I might play this same list or very similar to it, but try tactical secondaries myself with it. See if the same list functions just as well, and sort of see if I can chop and change from match mission to opponent, because I think that's probably the best way that I'm seeing it, at least anyway. But the changes, there are some changes I think I might make. I've actually got a game to go and play this evening at the local club. As mentioned, it's Aiden's, the club Aiden's one of the organisers at. So you get paired into a random person. I don't know what I'm going to play against yet, but I think the third Rhino wasn't really needed. I think using, deploying Plague Marines behind the Rhinos, like Pace talked about on his one, and it's something I'd done in previous editions. I actually misunderstood what Pace said. I thought he said he got out one Rhino advanced, got within 3 of another, and got him within the same turn, which I was questioning, and I questioned it, I think, on the video series that Aiden does, the Death Guard faction fundamentals, because I joined him on the Allies one, and he missed the Rhino, so I jumped in on that, and we did talk a little bit about Rhinos on there, so you might hear my thoughts there. But I think the third one could just stand Plague Marines behind the 2 Rhinos. When one squad gets out, get them in, because I did just use them as launching points really, and then late games I maybe came and did teleport homers or cleanse or pushed up the board. So I think 2 would actually be enough. And then I thought the third squad of Nurglings, in the one where you take the -1 to hit plague, -1 weapon of ballistic skill, contagion, I actually think they were really good. They were really useful. But the third one, sometimes it was good to have one threatening the opponent's deployment zone for that, teleport homers. But the third one did sometimes feel about a place, and I did actually miss something to screen a home field objective, because sometimes the cultists wanted to run forwards and use a 6-inch scout move and then be the first one to cleanse, or maybe even do a screen, or teleport homers. I did miss, sometimes I had to put them on my home field just to add something on there, because some of the deployment zones behind terrain on UKTC are quite deep, so I had to sort of use them to fill the spaces. So I think maybe basically I'm going to drop a Rhino and a squad of Nurglings to get me points to put a second squad of cultists in, so one more trading unit, one more action monkey to sort of push forward, and also play fix secondaries, and maybe even also do tactical of as a side of the mission. And then the other squad, the other points to be 10 Poxwalkers, just to stand on my home field and make it so I'm not having to sometimes sort of do it with predators. Although once a predator sticker they can roll off, but it means I have to start them sometimes where I don't mean to be. So I'm going to try that, and also maybe have more of a presence at screen in my backfield. So that's what I'm going to take away from those games and experiment with in the next iteration. And like I say, I might try fix, continue, but I might also try the same list of tactical 3 times and see how it compares, to sort of have the comparison and see, can I do both, or do I need to sort of go hard into tactical or fix? Because I think tactical, you probably do want 2 deep striking units, and obviously the Nurglings are normally deploying the centre, but then if I've got a second squad of cultists, could the cultists run in the centre and do the same thing with the forward deploy, especially on the missions where I can do that? So there's questions to try. I've still got sort of things I'm going to do. I don't have any events booked in at the moment. We've got the event that I'm TOing at on the 11th and 12th of November. So I'll be there. Aiden's actually playing in that one, so maybe that'll be there. Perhaps the next time we recap, maybe we'll recap at me as a TO and him as a player, talking about the meta and how his games went. I'm going to try and find maybe another RTT, and then December I've got 2 GTs booked in. So there might not be one of these series for a while. It might be, I might wait until December, play an iteration of this list either with fixed or tactical, based on, house and practice games going in the middle, and then recap on my thoughts. But in the meantime, thanks very much for listening to these. I know, like I say, I always feel like people tune in for Aiden, because I know he's got the player prowess that I'm sort of trying to replicate, or try to I'm riding his coattail sometimes, I feel like, in my in my performance. But I've definitely improved, as I've gone, and doing this and talking about this has definitely helped, verbalising things afterwards and trying to really analyse my game. So I appreciate people listening. Hopefully it is proven useful. But I'll wrap it up there. As I say, we've got loads more content coming. Stick to the channel and like, subscribe, follow us. Anything that people want to do is great. And of course, obviously, if you are a member, we put things out there to help people sort of have influence and help us sort of dictate and pick the content. We also have a Discord now as well, so follow us on there. And again, we've still got some tickets left. You buy from the Element Games website on the events page for the Stonehammer GT in November. So if anyone wants to come and meet me, or fancy some GTs in the north of England, in Stockport, near Manchester, get yourself down. It'd be great to meet you. Always great to have more Death Guard players there. But on that note, as I say, I'm going to sign off, guys. Thank you very much, and we'll see you in the next one.